सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततत्कतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः। देवाय तस्मै नमः। देवाय तस्मै नमः। So let us chant verses number 6 to 10, and we will do each half a verse twice. So I will chant the first half of the verse twice, and then maybe what we will do is, I think that's how we will do it. Half a verse twice, then the second verse twice. So number 6. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajantyante kalevaram. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajantyante kalevaram. Tam tam evaiti kaunteya सदा भाव भावितः। तम तम एवैति कौन्तेय सदा तदा भाव भावितः। तस्मात् सर्वेषु कालेषु माम् अनुस्मरयुध्य च। तस्मात् सर्वेषु कालेषु माम् अनुस्मरयुध्य च। मयि अर्पितमनो बुद्धिः मामे वैश्यस्य संशयम्। मयि अर्पितमनो बुद्धिः मामे वैश्यस्य संशयम्। अभ्यासयोगयुक्तेन चेतसा नान्यगामिना। अभ्यासयोगयुक्तेन चेतसा नान्यगामिना परमं पुरुषं दिव्यं याति पार्थानुचिन्तयन्। परमं पुरुषं दिव्यं याति पार्थानुचिन्तयन्। कविं पुराणम् अनुशासितारं मनोमणीयान् समसुत्यरेद्यः। कविं पुराणम् अनुशासितारम् अणोऽणीयान् समनुद्य स्मरेद्यः। सर्वस्य धातारमचिन्त्य रूपम् आदित्यवर्णं तमसः परस्तात्। सर्वस्य धातारमचिन्त्य रूपम् आदित्यवर्णं तमसः परस्तात्। प्रयाणकाले मनसाचलेन भक्त्या युक्तो योगबलेन चैव। प्रयाणकाले मनसाचलेन भक्त्या युक्तो योगबलेन चैव। ध्रुवोर्मध्ये प्राणमावेश्य सम्यक् सतं परं पुरुषमुपैति दिव्यम्। प्रयाणकाले ध्रुवोर्मध्ये प्राणमावेश्य सम्यक् satam param purusham upaiti divyam. Okay. So, the 8th chapter, of the Bhagavad Gita is part of the second triad of the Gita. The second triad is from chapter 7 through 12, and that has several objectives to talk about. One objective is to get to know Ishvara better. The first 6 chapters were to know the Jiva better. The second one is to know the Ishvara better. And also, the first 6 chapters were primarily, not exclusively, but primarily based on karma. The second 6 chapters are primarily based on upasana, bhakti. So as we saw that once you get to know something, then you develop a love for it by understanding all the implications of that jnana. And so that is what upasana is here about. And so number 8 continues that and talks a little bit about the upasana towards Ishvara. So we saw that. So there we saw that there are 3 parts to this. So one is several parts actually. The one part is that you don't know anything about God and Ishvara. The second one is that you get to know something about it, but you see Ishvara as being separate from you, and therefore there is a relationship of karma and karma phaladata. So you ask for some action, you do some actions based on your desires, and you expect those desires to be fulfilled by the all-knowing, all-powerful Ishvara. So this is what is called sakama bhakti or sakama upasana, you can say. Then comes, as the knowledge of the entire structure of the Srishti becomes apparent, becomes more understandable, then you develop not a sakama bhakti but nishkama bhakti. So as we saw, I'm just revising this, that first you get treatment for some injury. Some need is there because your ankle is broken, and so therefore you have to get the right treatment, and part of the treatment is to get better crutches. And so you keep on getting better crutches, and so on. So this is what is called sakama upasana. Finally, your main objective is not to even get any better crutches, not to get any crutches at all, to be able to walk by yourself. So this is what is called nishkama upasana, nishkama Ishvara upasana. And when nishkama Ishvara upasana comes in, it is preceded by, you see, the changeover from sakama to nishkama. Sakama means with desires, nishkama means without desires. This transfer from sakama to nishkama can only take place if you know that it is possible to be completely independent while living, completely desireless, completely fulfilled, completely happy, completely independent while you are living. So the sense of limitation becomes mithya, and the sense of infinite completion becomes satyam. So when that is known, then that can give rise to nishkama Ishvara upasana. So the Nishkama Vishwara Upasana means that I don't want anything specific. I want not to have a want. I want to be completely independent. This is called is Nishkama Ishvara Upasana. And if you have that, then you ask for being independent while you are alive. So that means then it transitions from karma to upasana to jnanam, to knowledge. This is the sequence. This is the sequence that Bhagavad Gita is primarily meant to convey. The entire objective of the teaching of Bhagavad Gita is to go through these stages of karma, upasana and jnanam. Karma, upasana and jnanam. Okay? Now, here's where the chapter 8 comes in. Chapter 8 says that the transition from upasana to jnanam takes place while you're alive. In fact, it only takes place when you are alive, not when you're dead. When you're dead, it is like deep sleep. Nothing happens there. You're just preparing yourself for the next life. So in the deep sleep also, we don't get any knowledge. It is just ananda. In the death also, there is nothing but ananda. You are really in with the Ishvara and there is nothing to be done. But then the seeds of knowledge still are, or seeds of ignorance are still there. And so we have to take another birth to fulfill the promise to go from upasana to jnanam. This is the way it is. Now, if for some reason the transition from upasana to jnanam does not take place while alive in this life, what then? This is the question. So, just as a revision, the understanding that I am fulfilled is what is called Sadhyo Mukti, Sadhyo Moksha. Sadhyo means right now. You understand that fully and you are done. All your Mahamoha is, you wake up from the dream and you are now an awake person. And as an awake person, you're no longer bothered by any of the limitations of the dream. So this is called Sadhyo Mukti. But suppose you are on the way to Mukti, but you're not there yet. Then what? This is where it is called Krama Mukti. So Krama Mukti means having an orderly Mukti. Not right now, but has some stages to it. What it means is it has to be done in a later life. Because the current equipment is getting problems, your body getting old, your mental capacity is also declining, and you're not able to finish the job, so to speak, then what? Chapter 8 specializes in then what. So there it said that if that's the case, then what you should do is to turn your attention from the worldly things to outwardly things while you are still alive. All this is the preparation while you are reaching the end of the life. And what we saw was that you can say, okay, I'm very busy right now, but when I am really nearing the end of my life, then I will switch over. Ishvara says it doesn't work that way, my dear, because first of all, you don't know when you're going to give up your life. Lord Yama can visit you any minute. And secondly, even if you have preparation for getting out of this life, there also your current vasanas, your current samskaras will pull you towards what you are most familiar with, which is your spouse, your children, your friends. They are all wailing and crying, and you are also saying goodbye to them. All of a sudden, the implications of the end of life come to you. Here, there's no space for Ishvara there. This is a fact. In the hospital or so wherever it is, there is a big scene going on, and you're not really. You cannot even think about Ishvara, let alone concentrate on Ishvara. So that's not going to work. Please understand that. So what does work is where you bring Ishvara into your life, and this is something you have to do. No one else can really bring that to you. And it has to be done in a way where the rest of the life does not get disturbed. In other words, you have to, so this is what's the meaning of this word on verse number 7. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, in all times, mam anusmara, please remember me. Remember me, how? To get to know that really I am responsible for the running of your life. You're not alone. I'm helping you with it. I'm primarily responsible for it. And so you should understand the person who's primarily responsible for you, who is really keeping you alive. It's kind of like, I remember when one of my sons had some medical problems, and he had to go through some surgeries, and when we took him to the hospital for those surgeries, and the poor guy was like, I don't know, 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and by that time he had already gone through the surgeries a couple of times. This was some repeated surgeries. And anytime we would take him there, he would start crying and saying, please don't take me to the hospital because the doctor is my enemy. He is going to give me pain. So obviously the parents, of course, were embracing this little boy. But inwardly we were saying the doctor is not your enemy. In fact, he is the one who is treating you. So anyway, so the outward sign were that not only is there is no Ishvara, the Ishvara is really creating problems for you. This is exactly our situation. We have no idea to what degree the Ishvara is supporting me. So get to know. Grow up. Don't be an 8. If my son was, and in fact this is what happened, I think one of his last surgeries when he was an older teenager, I think about 17 or 18. And at that time, he didn't have that feeling that he knows that the doctor is the best friend that he has. And so similarly here also, spiritually, we have to grow up to understand the presence of Ishvara in our life. When that happens, consciously bring Ishvara in along with the rest of the things. And again, your friends and spouses and children and so on, they may still command your attention. Inwardly though, so this is what is made. He says, Mameva smaran. Just be cognizant of my support to you. And yudhya cha. So yudhya cha means, so I was reading, remember I was telling you about anytime there is a text, I just want to make sure that there's not one of you calling me that there's a problem. That's why I look at it. And so you remember that we had a situation where I lost my train of thought. Usually it doesn't happen. Yeah, got it back. So Gita Chap. Remember I was telling you about this book by Swami Shankarananda, which I think I was praising to see that it's a very good commentary on the Gita. So when I was going through this verse last week, I also took that. I don't usually take that book out. It's 900 pages. In fact, one of the students had asked me to give him a reference for that, and so I gave it to Amit. So it's a very thick book. So I went into the explanation of the word Gita Chap. It's a very beautiful explanation of this word. So anyway, what it means is that while you are remembering me, you should continue to do what you are doing. You cannot say it's either or. I don't have time to remember God because I'm very busy. Or I'm so involved in remembering God that I have to give up my other duties. No, that's not the right way to look at it. Then what is the right way to look at it? So Swami Shankarananda says you should understand you Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi Brahmagno Brahmanahutam Brahmaiva tena gantavyam Brahma karma samadhina. That what the person who is trying is also an expression of Ishvara. What you are trying for is also an expression. The dreamer is also the waker. The dreamt is also the waker. Everything is nothing. The whole dream is nothing but the waker. And so when you say Yuddhacha means that you should also be fighting, there is no either or. You should just say that, in fact, this is the whole lesson of Rudram, Sri Rudram. And so in Rudram, both the chastiser is Ishvara as well as the one who protects you from the chastiser is also Ishvara. So in that sense you can see that if you're going through a very painful surgery, then the person who performs the painful surgery to you, gives you pain, is also the doctor, but the doctor is also giving you the pain to give you the freedom from pain. So here it says that you should not make it into kind of a big deal that no, I have to understand Ishvara and therefore I have to remember Ishvara, therefore I cannot be busy with my life. And be busy with your life, but just remember that it is not possible without Ishvara. That's how you remember. Remember him through your understanding, through your appreciation of the understanding. That's how you remember. In any case, you should begin doing it early enough in your life so that towards the end of the life, when you are now starting to say goodbye, your attention is to the next stage of your life. That is where you should be talking about it. And so internally, imagine yourself to be in a hospital bed and there are people crowded around you and crying and saying goodbye and this, that or the other. You don't want to insult them by saying, I don't, I'm on to something else. So smile at them and so on and so forth. But in the meantime, and especially when you have some moments to yourself, then begin your attention towards Ishvara and say, you are the one who created my life for me, and you are now responsible for taking me to the next stage of the life. Where you're taking me, I am not sure of, but I know, I'm pretty sure you have a plan in mind. You always do, and I trust you, and may I be well taken care of, please. You know how you do that. So you have to do that in stages so that you bring Ishvara into your life. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know what it will be when my time comes, but for the last 5-6 years, for some reason, I don't know why, I have really seen so many people dying. So many of my friends, so many of them, I don't know, it must be at least 10, 12 people. And it's a painful process, and full of confusion and full of frustration and pain and sorrow. There's no Ishvara in the life. No one thinks about it, at least from my observation of what the situation is. They can only talk about, they look at their children and so on, and they have a wistful look in their eyes. They say, my gosh, I'm not going to be able to see them again. It shouldn't happen that way. One should really have a gleam in their eyes to say goodbye. It's like Swami Chinmayananda used to say that, beautiful. He says, exactly the same way like you are going in a train, and all of a sudden in some station somebody comes up and sits down next to you, and you have lots of conversations with them, you share food and so on and so forth, you become friends, you laugh, you cry, crack jokes, all that for the next several hours. And then you ask them, where are you going? And they say, we're going to such and such place, we're going to Kanpur. And Kanpur comes in the middle of the night. So you said, it's very possible I may be asleep. And so, my goodbye to you. And maybe the best may you have a wonderful journey. You know you're never going to see them again. All of a sudden they became your pals for the last 6 hours, but now they're going to be gone. This is exactly the same situation with our family. And the family all of a sudden comes, some child is born into your family. Where the child comes from, what the background is, you have no idea. But they have chosen to ride the train of life with you. And you become pals. The child depends on you. You become their guardian. And you start to develop a bond with them and so on. And so the child is a passenger that has come from somewhere that you don't know, and they're also going to go somewhere that you don't know. Your paths are all going to be separated. So what is there to be sorry about? You enjoy the time together, and you say, when your time comes and when my time comes, goodbye. Hopefully you'll have a good, wherever you're going, you're successful. That should be the gleam in your eyes. That is how we should really think about it. It's the truth. It's not as though it's some kind of some artificial things that reduces the pain or anything. No, this is really the truth. We should see that. Anyway, so this is what is talked about. And the last thing we did was to go over verse number 8. And verse number 8, the key words there are Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena. Abhyasa Yoga. We did this last week, which was, what if you say, well, no, I don't know if I'm capable of doing that? Because we can all have that same feeling. This all looks very theoretical, and I am not confident that at the time of the end of my life that I'll be able to do this. Doesn't look like it'll be easy because, as you said, there will be so much pressure from around me and so on and so forth, and all of a sudden it'll hit me, my gosh, I'm leaving and there's nothing else that I can see anymore, and that power will be so overwhelming that I cannot really practice what you're telling me about understanding Ishvara and remembering him and all that. So there Krishna himself says, yes, you can, but it's going to take some practice. Practice makes perfect, and just like any yogi also does practice, you need to do this. In fact, you should do it not at the end of your life, but while you are living healthy. And do it in different circumstances. Don't just do it. So this is an interesting thing. When you have a problem, and a problem which is not solved by others around you, then you automatically remember some kind of a God. Lord, please help me. You don't understand that you have a vague idea. So this is what is called the 4 types of people that we went through this chapter 7. So artha means one who is in trouble. So that one you should remember, no doubt about it. Happy that you do it, and you naturally will, and you will do it. But here's the thing. Even when you are having a positive experience in your life, when you are happy, there also have the Abhyasa Yoga of remembering Ishvara. But we don't. This is the issue. When we are happy, we feel, you know what, I'm such a lucky person, I'm blessed. You don't know, sorry, no, the blessing doesn't come into the picture at all. You feel I'm very happy, as though I did it on my own. And the Ishvara is the farthest thing from you. Only when you are in trouble, then you have a possibility, because now there's nothing else you can do. So you resort to it, but the moment you are happy, you forget about it. So practice means you have to practice under different circumstances, even when you are happy. Try to bring Ishvara into your life and says, which is a fact. You're happy because, yes, there were some efforts on your part, but really you have no idea all the things that had to go right to make you happy. Think about that. So remember Ishvara at that time. Anyway, so the key part of the 8th verse was Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena Chetasa na anya gamina paramam purusham divyam yati partha anchintayan. It says, hey Partha, that if you could do that, then this paramam purusham divyam. Paramam, of course, is a very important word. You should know the meaning of that by now. Param or paramam is one the same. Paramam means more than anything else. which is of truth. We have no idea that more than anyone else in my life, Ishvara is my support. This is the word Paramam means. When everybody else has some role to play, Ishvara has an overwhelming role to play. It's called Paramam. Purusham we also discussed this. Divyam. Divyam means, of course, the effulgent one. The effulgent one, the one that shines. And as Divyam, it is through your own Atma, your own self, that the Paramam Purusham is supporting you. And so how is that? Because the very nature of Sat, Chit and Ananda is in and through all your experiences. None of your experiences will be alive were it not be for Divyam Paramam Purusha. So it's important that you recognize that. And this will be done in the next verse also, number 9, when we go to it. Anyway, so this was number 8, where the key word was Yoga Abhyasa, Abhyasa Yoga. Okay. Now, in verse number 9, the nature of Ishvara is now talked about. Because, of course, in the Gita, things are repeated as a reminder. So, in some senses, the Gita is a summary of both sadhya and sadhana. Sadhya is what is to be achieved, and sadhana is how to achieve it. So, at the end of each chapter, as you know, there is Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre. So, Brahma Vidya is the sadhya, and Yoga Shastra is the sadhana. So, up until now, in the last few verses, we were talking about sadhana, right? We were talking about, please remember Ishvara. How to remember Ishvara? Through yoga, abhyasa yoga, sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhya cha. All of that was talked about as sadhana. Now we go back to sadhya. So each chapter in the Gita is an amalgam of both of sadhya and sadhana. Even though the emphasis is more or less in one or the other, but they both occur at all the time, because knowing exactly what I need to, where I'm going, knowing exactly where I'm going is important for me to know what to do, how to get there, sadhana. But where am I going is sadhya. So here, Mam anusmara yudhya. Please you remember me. So the question is, how exactly do I remember you? How do I recognize you? How do I know you? Not recognize it. How do I know you? That is now given in verse number 9. So the verse number 9 goes from sadhana to sadhya. And it says, Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram Anoha Aniyan Samanadyu Sam Anusmaredyaha Anoha Aniyan Sam Anusmaredyaha Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasaf Parastat. So let's look into all these beautiful adjectives that have been presented in this verse, which sketch out how do I know Paramatma, Parameshwara. How do I know that? Because right now it's very vague in my mind. Yes, I know that He's the one who is beating my heart. He's the one who is making the blood flow, all of that. But how? Not sure about it. So give some further ideas about that. This verse is given. So the first word is kavim. So kavim means one who is all-knowing. One which is all-knowing. All-knowing means one whose knowledge and capability is not limited. So if you look at our own situation, our knowledge and capabilities are quite good but very limited. We know a few things, but in the scheme of the whole world, it's very few things. Just enough to get by in my life. I know a few things about myself, my body, my mind, my knowledge, my language, my friends. I know exactly where I live. Few things I know. There is so much that I don't know. That's not the situation with Ishvara. Because Ishvara is the one who is the self amongst all of us. So when you say I know, that means as a person, as a limited person, I have certain things. And there are other people who know some things that are common to me and some things that are unique to them. And who is the one who is knowing that? It is really the Ishvara working through me that I know, working through somebody else that they also know. So really in all knowledges and all capabilities, it is Ishvara's capability and knowledge which is working. You can, the very simple example that in my room space it is space, in somebody else's room space also it is space. My room spaceness is due to the total space. Somebody else's room spaceness limitation is also through the unlimited space. As simple as that. Sarvasya bhavam. So this is the word kavi. Kavi also means that it has it is paradarshi. So the word kavi can also be used. Kavi can be used in different ways. One of them is a poet is called a kavi. But more importantly, in the spiritual circles, a kavi is the one who is called a paradarshi. Paradarshi means one who can see far. So, for example, a very wise person can see what the near future holds. Very simply, for example, in the case of, let's say, economics. So, an economic student may not know this, but a professor who has really studied all of these cycles of economic cycles can predict that I think the next 5 years are going to be like this. So he has some insight into the future which hasn't happened yet, but is very likely to happen is called a kavi. Anyway, the word kavi means all-knowing, wise, and being able to predict the future, if you may. So this is called kavi. So that is one of the qualities of Ishvara. Okay, kavihi. Next word is Puranam. So Puranam doesn't mean our 18 Puranas. It means the one who is the ancient one. And what is the meaning of the ancient, the word ancient? It means the one who is the creator of the entire cosmos and one who is not himself created, the uncreated creator. Is called Puranam. Also called Sanatana. So in Hinduism, the Vedic knowledge is called Sanatana Dharma. Means that one which was never created by a human being. It has always been there. The Vedas and the Vedic knowledge will be there beyond time. It may be interpreted in a certain way in a given time. That's a different thing altogether. But this is apaurushaya, which is not paurushaya, which is not human-made. It is made by Divya Purusham himself. This is the Sanatanam. This is what is called Puranam. Puranam. In the Dakshinamurti, image here, we saw there is a verse there which says that the teacher is very young. In fact, if you look at sometimes a teacher like Adi Shankara and surrounded by students and so on, the teacher is very young, but the students are very old. So the reason for this picturization is that the teacher, which is Puranam, which is Ishvara, which is Sanatana, is ageless. So the youth of the teacher symbolizes the fact that Ishvara, even though the Ishvara has been there for trillions of years, is still the same. Whereas the jivas that are also very, very old, but they keep on getting older. They have a different lives. And in fact, a baby born in this life was a very old person, hopefully, in the previous life, which was even older than the previous life. So the Shishyas are very old, symbolically. The teacher is Puranam Sanatana. So that's the word Puranam. Anushasitaram is the next word. Anushasitaram. Anushasitaram means the one who is responsible for giving the karma phala, the results of all actions, physical actions and even moral ethical actions or immoral unethical actions. And so the whole system, the whole structure where nothing escapes the eye of the Ishvara. Imagine Let's just imagine what the structure would have to be. That you and I are very limited in our ability to know. This is what happens when a crime is committed. There is a struggle to find out whether the person is guilty or not. And sometimes there is not enough evidence to convict a person. So the judges also say that it is very, very possible that he may have done it. But we don't know for sure because we don't have the evidence. And so therefore we cannot convict the person. This is how the human laws are. This does not apply to Ishvara. Whether the human punishment goes far enough or not may or may not happen, because it's very possible that we may say, oh, release him after 10 years or 5 years. So it becomes a kind of like a second degree murder or third degree murder, because we don't know whether the intent was there or not. But this kind of uncertainty does not apply to Ishvara. Knows exactly what was intended by anyone at any one time, and the karma phala will take care of it. He may escape the human jail for a while, but the payment will be made. So this is what is called anushasitaram, means that he is the karma phala data. He is the giver of an unfailing, unequal, in a completely comprehensive set of rules, automatically done. Swami Chinmanand used to say that Vishnu is lying in just sleep. And because all the things that are necessary to run the world are already happening, it's been completely computerized in the cloud, and so the Vishnu is now relaxed. He doesn't have to scratch his head and says, okay, now what punishment should I give to this? It's done. The karma and karma phala are in perfect balance, and it will be taken care of. And nothing really can go wrong. Everything is really in order. Anyway, anushasitara. Anoho aniyan. So anoho aniya means subtler than even the subtlest. Subtler than the subtlest means it is not available for objectification. In fact, it is the very essence of any transaction, any experience. It is what the experience is based out of. It is the very sakshi of it. We went through this in the last class a little bit. It is something more than the known, something more than the unknown. It is the very presence of it. And so, anoho aniyan. So, in the Kathopanishad also it says, anoho aniyan mahato mahiyan. So, it means it is smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest. So, this kind of a contradiction is very revealing when it is understood. So as we have seen it, that the water is smaller than the smallest droplet of water and bigger than the biggest wavelet of the water. It is something which is the very content of both the small as well as the big. So this is what is called anoho aniyan. So anything which is indicated by it, something which is gross, does not give full justice to it. It is something which is subtler than any manifestation. Like, for example, a flag of a nation is a very sacred thing because it symbolizes what the nation is. But the reality of the nation is something much more than a flag, obviously. Here Swami Paramarthananda says that some of our, we seek certain security, certain some fullness and so on. Those are all experiential security, experiential fullness. But the very essence, formless essence of security and fullness is what anyoho aniyan could mean. Very beautiful explanation. Then, in the second line, sarvasya dhataram. So one who is the very substratum. Obviously, when we say anoho aniyan, it means the second word is sarvasya dhataram. So the water is the substratum of the smallest droplet as well as the biggest wave. Sarvasya dhataram. Achintya Rupam. Achintya Rupam, of course, means the one exactly the same continuation with the same thing. That it is not subject to being objectified. Because the mind is an instrument for objectifying things. So we have the sense organs that are at the mercy of the mind. And the mind is the boss of all the instruments of sense organs. And the sense organs present the data to the mind, and the mind cognizes it and says, aha, this is soft, this is hard, this is good, this is bad, this is a good sound, this is a noise, all those kinds of things that the mind is able to objectify. But then the mind itself is nothing but a reflection of the Sakshi. You cannot have a mind unless you have the Sakshi behind it. So the Sakshi, this is the example that is given, that the Sakshi is kind of like the battery of a flashlight. So the flashlight can see everything else except the battery itself. So one can say, I don't think there is any such thing as a battery because I've been looking around for the battery everywhere and I can't seem to find it, so it is not there. It said, no, the very fact that you are looking around is made possible by the battery. Oh, I see, it is beyond what can be looked at. So in that manner it is achintya rupam. Then comes aditya varnam. Aditya varnam means, Aditya means the sun. The S-U-N, sun, is called Aditya. And Varnan means the color, the form of the sun. So what does that mean? So what that means is, it is self-effulgent. The sun is a very beautiful manifestation of the Atma. It is the embodiment of Atma. How? Because the sun illuminates everything else without needing to illuminate itself. It is self-illuminating, self-existing. The light of the sun is self-existing. A beautiful manifestation of Ishvara, really. As we saw in the Purusha Suktam, that if we look upon the sun as an inert object, we miss the point. We miss the point that it is in fact a manifestation of Ishvara. Because the Ishvara's creation requires an independent source of light and heat. You cannot have this creation without the fundamental aspects of light and heat. And where is that going to come from? If the sun also requires some support, then we have to go to that support. So the whole Shrishti is made out of these millions and trillions of suns all over that provide the heat and light independently. What a creation. After that, then everything else is dependent on it. Moon is dependent on it, clouds depend on it, water depends on it, life depends on it. The whole life becomes dependent on the sun. But the very source of life, if you may, of prana, is the sun itself. And so, Ishvara, and so the sun, of course, is just an embodiment of Ishvara. But the creator of the sun is Ishvara, who is, if the sun itself is self-illuminating, you can imagine the source of the self-illumination. In that sense, the sun is also not completely dependent, it is not completely independent, it depends upon Ishvara's creation. But ultimately, the Ishvara is the one who is independent, who is self-illuminating. So the sun is a symbol. So he's describing Ishvara here. So he says Aditya Varnam. Aditya Varna means it is the very nature of the sun. And what is the nature of the sun? Self-illuminating, self-generating of the heat. Aditya Varna. The next one is Tamasaf Parastat. Tamasaf Parastat means one which is beyond darkness, one which is unaffected by darkness. This is the difference between Surya Jyotihi, the light of the sun, and Atma Jyotihi, the light of the Atma. Look at the difference between them. See, the sun is also self-illuminating. And we say that Ishvara and the Atma, Paramatma, is also self-illuminating. But there is a difference between them. One is an embodied form of Ishvara. The other one is the Ishvara himself. No embodiment. Unmanifest. As we saw in the earlier class. How? So the sun can illuminate everything but it cannot illuminate darkness. Now look at this, interesting. It cannot illuminate darkness. You remember the story? I don't remember which class I gave this story. And Swami Dayanand was very fond of giving this story. That in his village there was a wedding, or in any village there was a big wedding, a village wedding, and those are the days where there was no electricity at night. So usually the weddings are done during the day while the sunlight is there. But so then apparently the people thought, then I think we can have it in the evening also. But what we need to do is to light up the ceremony with some petromax, which is a very intense generation of light through this gas as part of this petromax. And so there was an elaborate instrument to create the light from this gas. And it's a heavy kind of like an equipment. And so they put petromaxes at some places, and then there were assemblies that people were coming in and so on and so forth. So the arranger of the marriage had arranged for somebody to put the petromax on top of their head. They put a turban on their head, and on top of that they're carrying this petromax. And they paid money on an hourly basis and said, listen, for the next 3-4 hours, here's what we would like you to do. You please walk to areas that seemed very dark and just stay there for a while until there are people who have left the darkness, go someplace else. Then you can follow them or go to some other places, but you have to look for some dark places. This is what you have to do. So they said, sir, yeah, that's all very clear and I'll do it. So he puts this on his head. So about 15 minutes later, he comes back very frustrated and said, sir, you have done me a great disservice because you paid me for money and I cannot find what you've asked me to do. He says, what do you mean I cannot find? I asked you to find there are so many dark places around it. He says, sir, I never found any darkness. Wherever I will go, I had light. There was light there, and I could not find the darkness at all. So this is the situation. Yeah, I remember there was a news report one time that in Queen Elizabeth, English Queen, she's the Queen of all of Commonwealth countries. So this is something like, I think about 20 years ago, something like that. She went to visit Australia, and she was reading the Sydney newspaper. She was in Sydney, Australia, and she was reading the newspaper, and the newspaper said, this is after the visit, when she was flying back to England from Sydney. So she had picked up the local newspaper, and the newspaper said, you know, the biggest problem in this city is the traffic jams. We never used to have so many. Now there are so many cars, and people have to commute for hours in the morning to get to the job. It really is a big mess. Even the main thoroughfare is now completely clogged. This she's reading. So she's supposed to have remarked to, this is apparently a true story, she remarked to one of her people saying, that is so funny. I spent the last 2-3 days in Sydney. I never saw any traffic jam. Everything seemed to be going okay. I don't understand what they're talking about. So her staff said, Madam, they had cleared the traffic jam for you when you were there. So naturally you would not see it, but when you leave, traffic comes back to a standstill as usual. He says, oh, I see, I didn't realize that. So exactly like this Petromax guy said, I cannot find darkness. So the Surya Jyoti, the sunlight, can light everything except for darkness. It cannot light up darkness. But Atma Jyoti can even light up darkness. This is a very important thing to see. This is something one can meditate on, really. And in fact, this is a section in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad where this is systematically brought out. So they say, how do things get lighted up? So they say that it begins this analysis by saying that the sun lights it up. Okay? But what if the sun is not there? Well, the moonlight lights it up. What if the moon is not there? Then the starlights light it up. When the starlights are not there, maybe the city light lights it up. The local lamp lights it up. What if the lamp is also turned out and it's complete darkness? The Atma Jyoti lights it up. Even when it is dark, your awareness lights it. You say, my gosh, it is so dark. I can't even see my hands. The awareness that I can see, that I cannot see my hand is there. So the Atma Jyoti goes beyond whether it is daylight or night, where it is light or darkness, where it is the presence of something and non-presence of something. The Atma is there. See that for yourself. That is the Atma of Ishvara. And that is the same Atma that He is given it to you. Your consciousness. Same Satyam Jnanam Anantam. See the presence of that. That is you. That is the Paramatma. Not just the Jivatma. That is the very underlying Sarvasya Dhataram. Don't you see this? This is very clear. So this is the Amam Anusmara Yudhya Cha. This is what you should remember. When you are on the deathbed, remember this. So this is the verse that sketches the sadhya, what you need to remember. Earlier we saw how to remember, but what is it that you need to remember is given by the verse number 9. Beautiful verse. Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram Ano Aniyan Anusmattaretyaha Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasaf Parasta. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Harihi Om. In the earlier class we had some freezing of the frame. I hope we didn't have it in this class, although it's very possible. We're still working on it. We'll solve it, but it's still work in process. So Satish, you asked, please see if you can elaborate the distinction between Ishvara and Parameshvara with the word Parama in between. So it really is this one and the same. So in fact, if you look at the etymology of the word Ishvara, it comes from two segments of the word, Sanskrit words. One is Ish, Isha, and the other one is Swara, Varat Pratyaya. Varach Pratyaya is a suffix which means totally, nothing but, is called Varach. In fact, the word for sun is called Bhaswara. So Bha here means the emanation of the light, and Varach Pratyaya added to Bha means nothing but light, called Bhaswara. So the word Ishvara means Isha and Swarach, Varach. And so Isha means one who is the boss, one who is the total controller, and one is who is the controller, and the Varach comes from nothing but the controller. It is Ishvaraha. So because you and I are controller, we are bosses of a few things here and there, but not everybody's boss. But the one who is everyone's boss, top boss, is called Ishvara. And that is what is clarified by the word Parama. So Parama and Ishvara in a way are the same. And the reason why two words are used is, if you don't use the word Parama, you may have a feeling that it is not Parama. It is just Ishvara, you don't understand. But the word Ishvara itself admits the word Varach as part of that. So Parama clarifies it really. It does not a different meaning. It just means Sarvasya Ishvaraha, that the Atma for you and the Atma for me and Atma for everyone else is really the same, which is Parama. That's how it is interpreted. So that's how I would see that. All right. If there's no other questions, then we will hopefully see you next Saturday. Om.